Gabriella, in Ohio, could you give us just a little bit of background on the policy changes that occurred in your state this year, first of all, and then summarize the problem or the issue that your policy reform proposal sought to address originally?
Sure. First, I just have to say, it's really great to see so many friends in this work in the room, and I thank you to Lori and the MacArthur Foundation for having us here. And really, so many of you all have been mentors and models to me in the work that I do, so it's really a pleasure to be here. So to respond to your question, though, broadly speaking, we really set out to accomplish three things, which is to realign costs, sort of public dollars that had been going to more costly and ineffective kinds of placements to those that showed better outcomes for kids. So we had a realignment strategy. We had a reinvestment strategy where public dollars were already going toward good works in Ohio. We have, many of you have probably heard about our national Reclaim. It's now a national model, I think, our Reclaim program. So reinvesting in what works in Ohio. And then the third piece of our strategy was really around revising some of our sentencing laws to restore some of the fundamental principles of our juvenile justice system that, frankly, have been kind of pushed away in the last couple of decades. So that's it, sort of broadly speaking. But I have to say that part of what I think Jeff and I and our team really worked toward first was having an agreed common purpose, which Lori touched on, which is a common goal that we have for all our kids, right? That they grow up to be successful, contributing members of our communities. We want that for all our kids. We want that for kids who've been damaged and hurt, and perhaps especially so for those who've caused harm and damage to others. So if we all agree, and we did, that that's something, regardless of party, regardless of experience, we wanted to accomplish, how do we get there? And to your point, the how is sometimes the devil in the details. We're, I don't want to say maybe simple folk in Ohio, but I like to say smart. We want to invest in what works. So having research and data to support our agenda was critical and is critical. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I really rely on the research that Lori touched on earlier, too, that's come out of the Models for Change to help support our agenda going forward. So we want to invest in what works. The other thing I just want to say, we may get to a little bit later, is before kind of getting a little bit into the details, we certainly didn't start from scratch in January. And while we had this incredible opportunity with new leadership, which I'm sure Jeff and others will talk about at our governor's office and at the legislature, and a budget crisis that we chose to see as an opportunity, we really were building and advancing work that had taken place in Ohio for many, many years. In addition to the Reclaim program and the work that lawyers who'd been litigating conditions at facilities could help to make the case for why these are costly and ineffective placements. We had our juvenile judges and our Supreme Court justice working on competency issues for many, many years. We were working with providers, building provider capacity. I think some of you might have heard from folks at the Center for Innovative Practices, Patrick Canary and his team, really working to build capacity at the local level. So you can't just necessarily close institutions without having something in place. So there was a lot of work, I just want to say, that really had been going on for a while. And I think our team seized a real window of opportunity to then really take advantage of some major change. Now, our charge was threefold to begin with. It's got to be cost savings, or at least cost neutral. It has to improve public safety, or certainly serve public benefit. And then third, which I would personally place as first, but was meaningful juvenile justice reform. I mean, don't aim low, and make it meaningful. And certainly we use the guiding principles of the MacArthur Models for Change as our kind of our guiding compass, that it's developmentally appropriate, fair, rational, effective, that kind of thing. So very briefly, I'll just sort of hit the 5 areas that we changed in terms of policy. One was really promoting research-informed practices, and we did that by putting language in our legislation around the Reclaim program that says we don't just want to support community programs, but we want to help build the capacity of those programs to be effective. We also had actually a budget language in our budget that calls for reallocating 45% of savings from facility closures or savings from institutional facilities into effective evidence-based community programs, which I think is unprecedented, certainly in our state. So we had this research-informed practice as one piece. The second piece was really around restoring judicial discretion in the juvenile system. So we ideally sought to sort of look at had become mandatory minimum practices in our state and wanted to look at ways to build more discretion in. We ended up with important sentencing changes, but they also reflect compromises. So we restored judicial discretion in some ways. We had some of the third part was some sentencing reforms that really were some controversial issues around use of firearms, as well as creating a reverse waiver provision in our state for kids who are transferred to the adult system. A fourth piece was we adopted an entire juvenile competency law in Ohio, again, thanks to the work of many, many others long before us. And then finally, we created something called an Interagency Mental Health Juvenile Justice Task Force, which is doing its work now, and we did that very intentionally so that we would have a place to go to for continued, sustained work moving forward. So I think I probably hit my 5 minutes, but I just want to say, if there's one last message on this, is that I think we sought bold, real change in Ohio, and we are on our way.
Wonderful. I'm now going to let Jeff chime in, because I know that in order to help and assist make that happen and champion it in some places, you had to build a team. There had to be possibly even some gathering together of unlikely allies. Who are they? How did you do it?
Well, thank you. The first thing I have to say is my last 4 years in the legislature, I was number 2 in the Senate, President Pro Tem. The job of the number 2 is not to make the policy decisions, but to make the trains leave the station. And we want to make sure everybody who needed to be on it was on it. If they didn't have all their baggage, it didn't matter, as long as there was the right fuel and we could get it done. And oops, if you couldn't get there in time and do it your right way, well, there's always fill in the blank. And, as a lobbyist, after that, or advisor, consultant, there's a tendency to do some of the same kind of thing with your clients. I mean, we're going to have a bill passing on this day. You need to be a part of it. You need to have this in it. Let's work, but let's also make sure that the train leaves and you're on it, and, okay, come back another day. And frankly, coming into this, I felt some of that same sort of cynicism. Now, my entire career was not cynicism, but you get into a pattern. And then I meet Gabriella, a wonderful person, but my first impression was, she probably doesn't like me to say this, she's the daughter of a former governor, and she knows this little about how bills are really passed. Oh my gosh, and if she's the best of the group, imagine what this is going to be like. I sort of felt myself in one of those reality TV shows where, the person swoops in and says, oh my gosh, you need to reorganize your house, and I can tell you how to do everything. And it was fun at the beginning, to get into that, and I discovered they had all this great passion and absolutely no clue how things were really done. And then I met the judges, and what I was used to about judges, to be honest, was that juvenile judges, along with other judges, were really good at lecturing us as if we were defendants in their court, and but we're not going to have any ability to influence what a legislator would do. And I discovered that the juvenile judges are different than other judges. They have a sense of personal responsibility, that if you let yourself listen to them, they walk home with these cases every night. They don't get to leave the kids the day that they send them somewhere. They're still worrying about this. There is an incredible commitment that shines through, and they make you elevate your game, which allowed me to look back at the advocates and realize that they had the same kind of thing going on. That once you get past the fact that, they needed a directory to figure out who was in charge, they care a lot and have a lot of experience and a lot to contribute. And, first of all, I want to recognize we have 2 of our juvenile judges, leading lights, that are here right now. Judge Linda Teodosio from Summit County and Judge Stephen Michael from Jackson County.